وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we continue from where we stopped or left off last week. Tafseer of Surat AlHashr. And Surat AlHashr so far has tackled the relationships or organizing the relationships within the country, between citizens, by looking at the following topics. It looked at what treason is, meaning what would break it, what breaks the bond of citizenship. It looked at the relationship that needs to exist financially within the country, meaning what the financial system has to be based upon. It looked at the relation, which is the relationship with the poor, by the way, or the less fortunate within an ummah or within a country. It looked at the relationship between the Muslims within that country in terms of those who are veterans who've been there for a long time, those who are new, and then we're going to talk about. And then today, here's the third group that the surah is going to talk about: organization amongst. And the point of all of this is really to set a precedence for us as Muslims who will come, 1,000 years later or more, to figure out how we will organize the relationships within our countries in an appropriate manner. And the Quran is one of the few scriptures that I'm aware of that talk about citizenship and talk about the idea that there will be people living amongst you who are not like you and will have similar rights to you. And you have to figure out how you're going to actually go by that. Because most scripture doesn't really dive into that, because the purpose was different from the Torah and the Injil and the books that came before. But the Quran, the purpose of the Quran was to offer that final message and to help Muslims organize in a way where they would take care of each other and also have within their countries people who may not necessarily believe in what they believe in or have different backgrounds or different faiths, and they still are able to function and coexist. Which is why the last group will look at the disbelievers and the munafiqeen together. And that'll be the final organizational piece. So basically looked at what breaks it, which is treason. Then I looked at the financial system with the relationship, which is the financial relationship with those who are in need. And then amongst Muslims, identifying that there's not just one group. Muslims sometimes will be different. I mean, even Muslims amongst each other, we may not be exactly the same. We may have different backgrounds. We may have different stories. We may not be culturally different, which is what the two verses that we recited last week were. It talked about the Muhajirin, the people who came from Mecca, and the Ansar, the people who came from Medina. And then there's going to be a third group that we're going to recite about today. And that's in the Prophet ﷺ's Medina. Meaning in his country, the one that he built, like the original one, there were three groups of Muslims. Aside from the other groups, the mushrikeen, the munafiqeen, the Ahl Kitab, all the other groups, the Muslims were three groups. So it wasn't a homogeneous landscape. It was quite heterogeneous. There was a lot of different, dealing with different type of people, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that sets a precedence for us as Muslims this community is very diverse as Muslims. We're from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different tongues, and that's the norm. We shouldn't actually be trying to divide into smaller groups that are homogeneous. Like that was never the point. The surah is trying to explain to you that they all had to live together. They actually lived in each other's homes. Like the Muhajirin lived in the homes of the Ansar. The concept wasn't, so that we're going to take this piece of land, ask the Ansar to leave it, go build houses elsewhere, and this land will be for Muhajirin, this is their masjid, and here's the Ansar, and here's their masjid, here's how they'll function. That's not what happened. It was quite the opposite. He merged them together, alayhi salatu wasalam, in a way where they held on to their identities. When you bring people together and they actually mix, the goal of doing that is not to delete or erase the identity of one of the two groups. That wasn't the intention. That's not what happened. The Muhajirin continued to know who they were and where they came from, and so did the Ansar. The people of Medina knew where they came from. The people of Mecca knew where they came from. And they're identified as such in the Quran. And there was no attempt to remove that and say, okay, we're going to mix you together, this big pot, and now you're all going to be the same. No, they're going to be different, but you're still going to work together, function together, and live together. And that's really the value of understanding what I'm talking about here. Actually, there's a third group that we're going to point out in a moment. So as Muslims in the West, or anywhere really, and actually we can point that piece out a bit more, I think, meaningfully here in the West. I grew up in most of my life, I lived in Syria, close to Damascus. And where I grew up, not only was the community that I lived in homogeneous from a cultural perspective, it was almost homogeneous from a family name perspective. Like 90% of the people I played in the masjid carried my last name to that degree. Like it was very, and that was the norm. So when you came to Canada, one of the biggest gains I think that we picked up is the fact that the community that I was exposed to when I became a part of is a community that's extremely diverse, where people, like, forget about them just being Syrians and from the same village and from the same family. Now you're talking about Muslims from all corners of the earth. You're talking to people from everywhere. If you think about it, we come from all the continents. Even right now in this masjid, people come from all over. From Europe and Africa and in Asia and America. We're from everywhere. We have different backgrounds, different thought, different cultures, different norms, and still we function together. And that's what it's supposed to be. Like that is what we're supposed to be doing as Muslims. We're supposed to work together. We're supposed to be able. We're not supposed to divide into groups. We're not supposed to have silos. Here's the masjid here's the whatever masjid, and here's these people's masjid, and here's that people's masjid, and here they all live here. And that is not healthy, actually. It doesn't really help. It's not. It exists, by the way, everywhere, but it's not the healthy thing to be, where this masjid is just, it's all people from this background. Now, people tend to like to gather with those who are similar to them. That's normal. You're not required not to want to do that. You gravitate towards groups that are similar to you, and that's a part of being a human being, and that's fine. But masajid shouldn't be functioning in that manner. Masajid should make people feel welcome, allow them to gravitate towards one another within the vicinity of the haram. But still, the masajid should be built on the fact that they're open to everybody, and that they're diverse, and that regardless of where you come from, who you are, and you find a spot where you can be you're welcome, and you find your place, and that's really important. And I find that is a big gain when you come to Canada. Most of you come from if you go back to where you come from, you're going to find a masajid that are very similar. You go, everyone's the same backgrounds, and if you come from Lebanon or Syria or Palestine or wherever you come from, you come from even parts of Pakistan, you go back, it's the same people. They all look the same, which is great as well. There's a benefit to that too, but there's a uniqueness to the masajid here in the West where that's not the case anymore, where people are from all over, and you will have people running these masajid who come from almost every background as well. And that's very valuable. That is actually in keeping with what Surat AlHashr and the Quran teaches us, which is we have to be able to identify. Even the smallest differences should be respected, should be seen. The Quran didn't ignore and say, well, they were all Arab, right? Because most people are like, I don't know what you're saying. People of Mecca, people of Medina, I don't care. They're all Arab. Yeah, no, there are actually differences. There's actually unique differences, important ones that kind of matter a bit. And the Quran actually didn't decide to erase them and say, no, they're all Arab and that's all you need to know. The Quran pointed out, these people are from here, these people are from there. They are different. So acknowledging differences is important. Acknowledging cultures and acknowledging backgrounds, acknowledging that people, you come to masajid, they don't all have the exact same upbringing, exact same methodology of being in a masjid or learning, and that's okay. We don't all have to have the same madhab and the same way of doing things. That's fine. That's actually that's in my opinion, the evidence of a healthy functioning masjid, where people, regardless of what exactly how they were educated or what they find themselves able to come to a masjid and function in it. And that obviously falls on us a lot in terms of how we run masajid in ways that people don't feel neglected or ignored or repelled based on the presentation. But still, it's something worthy of talking about, that the Quran actually looked at these groups and pointed them out. So we're going to continue inshallah today with ayah number 10. My goal is actually to get through the full page, maybe the verse after it, because it's all one little continuation, and then we'll complete Surat AlHashr hopefully next week. I say that today knowing that I'll probably not get through any of what I'm saying, but that's my goal, and if I fail, then that's just fine. So we'll start with ayah number 10 inshallah of Surat AlHashr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين جاءوا من بعدهم يقولون ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. So when I pointed out for you last week that the three verses that talk about the relationship within the country, the citizenship relationships that exist between Muslims, were very sentimental. All three of them were. They were very systematic and very legally based or logistically based. When it talked about treason, when it talked about the financial system, when it talked about munafiqeen, it will also be very, very rule based. This is what can be, this is what can't be. But when it talked about the relationship between the different groups of Muslims, it was extremely, extremely sentimental. It was very, very emotional. And it talked about love, and it talked about selflessness, and it talked about sacrifice, and it talked about how they will give up what they want for others, and how they will put the needs of their brothers and sisters ahead of their own. How they are happy when they see people coming to them. They love the immigrants, which is a phrase that has never been said before. That's never been said in the history of phrases. You can tolerate, maybe the best you can hope is we can tolerate immigrants. They said we love those to immigrate. We want them to immigrate. We can't wait for them to come and occupy our homes and live with us. And it's a very beautiful concept, acknowledging that there are those who had to leave their homes and come, and those who have been there beforehand that were waiting for them, and that this relationship is very much based on sacrifice and love and brotherhood. The third group that we just recited is the group that came وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِم. It's really interesting. The Quran actually points out a third group that I didn't, before I read this surah, before I understood this surah, learned the tafsir of it, didn't even know it necessarily existed as a group. I thought, if you were to ask me who are the two groups, Muslims, it's the Muhajirin from Mecca and the Ansar, and that's pretty much it. No. وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِم, the third group. The group that will come in later on. Meaning those who will accept Islam and come to Medina a few years into it, meaning it's a bit too late. Like they weren't there for the mu'akha peace. They didn't live in they weren't there for the battles. They weren't there for the sacrifice. I mean, they came in and things were already on a slope going upwards. Like they didn't come before it hit rock bottom and things were really difficult. They didn't persevere through that peace. They came by when things were getting a little bit better. And that happens a lot. When we're trying to build something, it happens in companies, it happens in it happens everywhere. Where there's different phases for running something. There are those who were there from the beginning, who went through the worst times, the worst of times. They were there, they persevered through the darkest of ages. And then as things start to go up a little bit, you have people added on. What happens? Right? What happens when those people are added on? There's a feeling from the people who were there from the beginning that you're not, you don't really belong to this. You're new. You have to sit quietly and sit behind and sit back and don't speak up too much. You weren't here from the beginning. I've been here from the beginning. That narrative becomes actually quite prominent. It's spoken a lot and it's felt. It's felt. So what does the ayah say? وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ, and those who will come after them. What are they going to say? يَقُولُونَ. This is the beauty of this ayah. It actually takes this whole concept that I'm going to explain to you, just summarize in a dua. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا. Oh our Lord, forgive us. Memorize this dua, by the way. It's a really, really good one. It's really something you should know and you can always use in your prayers. It's beautiful. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا. Oh our Lord, forgive us. وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا. And for our brothers and sisters. الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ. The ones who accepted the faith, the ones who committed to the iman and to the deen before us. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And do not allow for there to be any hatred, any discomfort, any envy in the hearts of the believers towards each other. Because that's what happens. What happens is that there's a little bit of disconnection between those who accept up front and those who came in late. Like Khalid ibn Walid, for example, and Amr ibn al-As. They came in late. They came in very, very late. Right? When they came, it was after Khaybar. All that was left was Fatah Makkah. And then there are people who came in after Fatah Makkah as well. So people, names that have value to them, like important names, people who later on carried the banner of Islam for many, many years to come, and were in leadership positions, by the way. both militarily and logistically and religiously and knowledge-based. They accepted late. Had this culture not been built in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and later by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, this wouldn't have worked. Had this culture of it doesn't matter when that this group is acknowledged as a worthy group, but it also explained to that group what they need to be. They need to understand that there are people who came before them. That's why the dua is, oh Allah, forgive us, and also forgive those who came to Iman before us. So there has to be acknowledgement of the sacrifices of the people who came before. There has to be respect for that. Right? You can never come into something late and then decide that you want to, change everything. Happens all the time. If you worked in any institution, any company, it happens all the time. You have fresh blood come in, and they decide that everything that has ever been done is wrong, and it needs to completely be destroyed and removed. And that is very hard for the person who has been working there all their lives to accept, even if it is true, which it rarely is. Which it rarely is. Very rarely that someone has been running something for a while and everything is wrong. It's not the case. But even if you feel that, it's very difficult for them to accept that. And that shouldn't be the way you come by it. Because you have to respect the ladina sabaquk, the ones who came before you. Sabaqa, someone who beat you to it. Like they just came, they have seniority. Seniority matters. It's not the only criteria for you to be in a position of leadership by far, for sure. But it has to be respected. It has to carry some weight. There has to be some merit to it. So what this ayah is saying is those who come later, they're valuable and they're important. They're a part of this group as well. It's acknowledging them as a part. Without this ayah, the Quran would have basically completely ignored them and said it's those who made the hijrah at the beginning, who came and lived in the homes and sacrificed their time. Everyone else, I don't know, we have nothing for them. Like we have nothing to say. Because you and I are from this group too. This ayah is the one that you and I basically are a part of, because you weren't للفقراء المهاجرين, as for the fuqara, the muhajirin who came, and you were not والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان. You and I were neither these people nor those. We just weren't there for it. Who are we? Because without this ayah, basically we don't really exist in this citizenship model that's being projected by the Quran. What we are is the third group. الذين جاءوا من بعدهم. We're the ones who came later. We came later. But it also applies to a lot of Muslims who came later then. But it continues to apply to the Day of Judgment, and that model continues to be used in other situations. You'll always have communities where you have veterans, where you have the muhajirin, you have the ansar. You have people in this community who were here at the beginning. You have people who came to them later. And then you have people who came much later. And that exists in this community that we live in right now. That's totally the case. There are people who are third or fourth generation here. There are people who are second generation here. And then there's a guy like me, who just walked off the boat a couple of years ago. And acknowledging that there's these groups, and that there has to be a dynamic of love, a dynamic of sacrifice, of selflessness, of collaboration, but also acknowledging that there are differences, meaning that people are not all the same, and they can't all act as if they are exactly the same in terms of their rights and what they're owed and what they've done, is important. It's the moment that you start ignoring other people's specificities or preferences or their advantages or what they've done, that you start ruining the reality of a society. And that's what happens when you start ignoring certain realities. You just start ignoring them and acting like they're not there. You start ruining the fabric of what a society could be. And that happens quite often in the world. It happens all the time, where people who worked hard to build something are either stripped of the honor and the integrity of doing it, like they're not allowed that anymore, or the opposite, they don't welcome them, people who are coming to them. Or the ones who come in later, they basically disregard everything that was done before them. And they flush it down the toilet and say, we don't need it, and they move on fresh as if nothing was done before. Or they are not giving the ability, or they're not acknowledged at all as a group, and they're not given the ability to actually add anything to it. Any of these scenarios that I'm offering you are very problematic, and they happen all the time. And not just in communities and societies and countries, they happen also on smaller levels and smaller groups and smaller gatherings. And in your life, at some point, you'll work within an institution, an organization, a company of some sort, and you'll see these dynamics very clearly. Like you'll remember what I'm saying because it happens all the time. So what is the way to do it? It's what the Quran pointed out. Those who are there first welcome those who come next, and there has to be a dynamic of sacrifice and love that comes amongst them. And then those who come later have to have respect. They have to respect those who came before them. They have to make dua for them. Making dua for someone for what they did is acknowledging the good that they did. It's acknowledging what they offered that was right. اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان. It's acknowledging that they did something right, something positive, that they actually had a good and helpful impact. It's acknowledging the good. And that's really important, because once you don't do that, you make it very hard to move forward. And this is what we're doing basically as a human race. We are trashing all of history. We're just trashing history. We're saying everything that the human race ever did prior to, I'm not sure, 1970 is just wrong. Everything you believed, everything you did, everything people thought was right, every ethic they carried, every moral, every norm, all of that is garbage. And then they keep on resetting. We keep on resetting. So, you know what? Everything that we talked about last year was wrong. We're going to start fresh from 2023. And then we'll do that. And that is not healthy. And that's not true. Forget about it's not even true. No, of course, there is ancient wisdom that exists everywhere. That's not even, honestly, there's wisdom that's not even necessarily Islamic that is very meaningful and very true. The Prophet ﷺ benefited from and pointed it out to us. And the Muslims went and they learned and they basically integrated, incorporated it into our deen, and it became a part of who we are. And that's how you learn. You don't learn by trashing everything before you. By saying, and the reason I'm focusing on this piece is because this is what is relevant to you and I. Because we're the الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ. We're supposed to be saying, رَبَّنَا غْفِرْ لَنَا. Forgive us for the mistakes we're making, and for the brothers and sisters who accepted Iman before us, acknowledging all the good things that they did. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And don't put in our hearts, or their hearts, or anyone's hearts, ghil, hatred, or envy, or any form of discomfort towards the believers. Meaning we shouldn't be carrying anything in our hearts towards each other. Neither those who went before us, nor those whom we are with today. And that's really difficult. That's one of the hardest things that you'll do, is being able to remove from your heart the ghil. And the word ghil comes from the concept of lock. So it's like you're carrying in your heart something that is locking it. It makes it difficult for you to open it up, open your heart up. Opening your heart is obviously figurative within this context of being someone who can empathize with those around them and see the good in what they were doing, and see the khair in what they offered, and put yourself in their position and actually acknowledge the hard work that they put in. But when the heart is closed, you can't see. As the poet says, وَعَيْنُ الرِّضَى عن كل عيب كليلة ألا إن عين السخط تبدي المساوية. That when you like something, you only see the good. When you don't like something, you can't see anything good. All you can see are the negatives. If you don't like something, all you can see are the negatives of that thing that you're looking at. If you dislike someone, suddenly everything they do is bad. Everything is horrible. Everything. Nothing. There's not one good thing about this human being or this what they're doing. Not all. And it happens. You see it all the time, especially when married people are fighting. You sit with them. They'll talk about each other as if there's not one good thing about it. And like, how did you put up with this person for 15 years if there's not one good thing about them? Ya Latif, you must be divine in your perseverance if you were able to put up with someone who was just pure evil for the full time. But that's what happens when we don't like something. We only see the bad, and we like something. We only see the good. People in love are oblivion to any aib that the other person may carry, and that's how it works. But that's not healthy for how a community would function at all. That's not helpful at all when we talk about societies. In order for societies to work, no, it can't be that way. We have to be able to see the good and see the bad, and accept and acknowledge the good and benefit from it and build on it, and not carry in our hearts anything towards those around us. That shouldn't be the case. And I'm going to tell you a story that may sound a bit funny to you, but I think it's a good example for this. For this ayah, which says, لا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. Our Lord, you are the most kind and tender, the most merciful. After the Prophet ﷺ died, passed away, ﷺ, there was a lot of controversy that occurred, especially after Uthman passed away. See, Uthman died as a shaheed. He was killed in his home as he was reciting his mushaf by the Khawarij of his time. And that caused a lot of divide amongst the Sahaba afterwards. They weren't sure what to do. He was the Khalifa, and he was murdered during the time of Hajj when Medina was almost empty because people were going Hajj, and he refused to allow the army to defend him. He refused. He said no. They tried to defend him. He said, no one defend me. I will not allow bloodshed to occur on my account. Meaning, if it's my blood they want, they can have it. I'm not anyone die for me. And he did that, radiallahu anhu, because he understood something the Prophet ﷺ taught him long time ago. It's like before the Prophet ﷺ passed away, there's a hadith in Muslim where he tells us, قال فأخذ عثمان, he took Uthman ﷺ, فساره, he whispered into his ear for a while, فقال أفقهت يا عثمان أفهمت يا عثمان, do you understand? He said, نعم يا رسول. And he would do it again 3 or 4 times in a row, just telling him something. And apparently the Prophet ﷺ explained to him, at some point in your life, you're going to be given a choice between your life or the life of Muslims. You have to make a decision of what's going to be more valuable to you at that moment. And Uthman chose the life of Muslims, and he said, if they're upset with me and I'm the problem, let them kill me. So he allowed for it. But then the Sahaba differed after, like, what do we do with the people who murdered the Khalifa? Right? Murdered it's treason. They murdered what do we do with these people? So they differed, and they fought for a bit about that. And it was based on their understanding of what haqq was. Everyone thought that this is the right thing to do. The other person, but they did it without hatred. And the story that I'm going to quote you that I think is meaningful for you to know is during one of these battles and Ali was on one side and Sayyidina Talha was on the other side, and they grew up together. Like they were a part of almost every major battle the Prophet ﷺ fought. And once, and in the midst of the battle, Talha was severely wounded. Talha actually died during that battle. And that Sayyidina Ali would come and he would carry him. He would see him on the ground. He would carry him to a tree, and he would say, "I wish." And he would say, word for Sayyidina Ali, he would say, "I wish I died 20 years before this moment, before I saw you in this position." And Talha would say, "May Allah make us amongst those." He says, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي صُدُورِهِم مِّن غِلٍّ, and we removed from their chests any form of ghil, any form of bigotry or hatred or disgruntlement or discomfort towards each other. إِخْوَانًا عَلَى سُرُرٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ. And then he passed away in the story. And even when they disagreed and it got to the point where the only way to figure it out was to actually take it to the battlefield, they still did not carry hatred. They still didn't carry hatred. And I think that piece is really important because I don't see that being the case. Actually, what I see, the first thing that happens is hatred immediately. And they fought physically and died and did not fill their hearts with hatred. And I don't know why the first thing we jump to, you don't like the sheikh, you don't like the imam, you don't like that person over there, you don't like them. Fine, so what? You weren't designed to like everybody to begin with. That's not even an expectation of being alive. But why do you have to carry ghil? Why do you have to become someone who is anti that other person and everything they say and everything that they do and everything that they produce is evil and there's nothing good that can ever come from them? And that is not objective, it is not true, and it's not fair either. And we have to, as Muslims, learn to get beyond that. You belong to a certain school of thought of Islamic law. Fine, great. It doesn't mean that you have to carry ghil against all those who don't necessarily agree with your point of view. It can't be ghil that you carry. You can't carry that type in your heart. You can disagree with them. You can ask Allah to forgive you and forgive them for the mistakes that they made. And you can point out what you think is inappropriate within their intellectual product. And then you could talk about the opinions and the merit for those opinions. But why are you carrying ghil? Why are we going around hating each other? That's a big problem. Especially when it's historic. Especially if there's like a historical figure that you hate. And especially if it's an Islamic historical figure. I find that to be one of the most, the biggest waste of time in the world. Well, what are you doing? Why do you care? You hear these younger people fight over this imam and that imam. These people have been dead for 800 years. Why are you disagreeing on whether? It doesn't matter to you. Just let it go. They're gone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, just let it go. Talk about if there's an opinion you think is problematic, if you think there's a rule that needs to be corrected, that's fine. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the implications of that and how we can change a mentality that is maybe toxic or affecting people negatively. But the point of hatred towards Muslims or towards your historical figures or to people living today, I find to be completely useless, and I don't agree, and I don't participate in that. I don't participate in that. I don't sit here and point out what this alim said or that alim said and how this person is doing this and how this. Yeah, there's a lot of people who I completely disagree with on almost everything. But I'm not going to carry ghil. I'm not going to use that to demean them or lessen their value, because that's not the point of this. That's not what we're supposed to be doing here. Read these ayat that talk about the relationship that has to exist between Muslims. I don't see anywhere where we become toxic or we become cruel or we become disrespectful. I don't feel that's not the case here. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا. It's a beautiful, just make, the people come later, they just make dua for the people before them. And they ask Allah not to fill hearts with hatred based on these differences. Why? Because they're going to come and change a lot of stuff. Because they're going to come and they're going to make adjustments and they're going to remove stuff and they're going to put other things in its place and point out mistakes that were made before. There shouldn't be ghil. The people who were there before should not feel that towards those who are making some changes, nor should the people who are coming making changes feel that about those who are there before them. That shouldn't be the nature of this relationship. There should be rahman. There should be, that's why Rabbana innaka ra'ufur rahim. You're the most tender. The usage of names here is very meaningful. Oh, our Lord, you're the most tender, the most merciful. So give us some of that tenderness and mercy so that we can use it with our people. So we can use it towards our brothers and sisters when we start to disagree with them. Because we will. Oh, for sure you will. The epic, everlasting struggle between the old and the new, or the old and the young. So that's all. It's ongoing. Always be there. The old trying to hold on, the young trying to move them out so they can do something new, and keeps on happening. Never stops. It's the story of life, story of the world. This ongoing struggle between young and old and new. And it's here in the deen as well. You're given a little bit of a guideline here. Come in and ask Allah to forgive you and forgive those who came before you. And don't fill your heart with hatred. And don't let hatred be the basis of the relationship. Make sure there's tenderness and make sure there's empathy as you move along. And if we took these small guidelines, it would be a much better outcome in terms of how we actually grow as an ummah. We're very vicious with one another, to say the least. Say the least, a lot of viciousness out there. You say something they don't like, you're very, very vicious. They can say stuff about you that is. I think, for me, and I'll share this with you as a personal. There was twice in my life that I felt that, but I think the one that was actually worse was once those posters came out. Once the posters came out, the Western posters and all that, and we tried to address it and talk about it. I think one of the most vicious words that were ever said to me and about me occurred like within that week that came later. Very, very harmful and very hurtful from people I knew well, people I'd known for years. And I thought to myself, what is the basis of this cruelty and this harshness? Aside from the fact that we weren't able to agree on an approach to something. Like we didn't agree on how we're going to deal with the problem that we see it. I have my way, I think this is the right way to do it. You think there's another way. So we differed, and that's fine. We can differ on how we approach a problem, that's fine. But why is there so much harshness? Why do we have to be so cruel to one another? Because it hurts, it makes it very difficult. And I never felt that before. It was a very fresh feeling in that, and kind of hearing that. Well, he said that, why would you say? I mean, that, come on, like, you know, that's not fair. That's not a fair phrase. And then when I looked into this issue after that happened, I looked into it a little bit more to see. I found it everywhere, and it happens all the time. Be careful of that. Like in your own life as you grow up and as you become involved in communities and stuff like that. Be aware and be careful of becoming extremely vicious towards Muslims who are working maybe on the other side of the rails. Like they're not with you specifically. They may be even a competing institution or a competing organization. Or maybe there are people that you don't fully agree with, like you don't like the way that they do things. Be careful from becoming vicious and disrespectful and lacking any form of objectivity when you approach or you talk about what they produced or what they did. Just use this ayah whenever you want to, when you ever feel that, just go back to this ayah. This is what the relationship should be based on. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. Beautiful dua. Oh, our Lord, forgive us. Forgive those who came and accepted the deen and were here before us, and do not put in our hearts any form of hatred towards the believers. Oh, our Lord, you're the most tender and the most empathetic and merciful. It's a beautiful dua. It's very meaningful. So those are the three ayat that summarized the relationship between Muslims within a community. We're going to start with ayah number 11 that we'll go through, talking a little bit about the disbelievers and the hypocrites as two groups that existed within the Prophet ﷺ city. It's going to look at it from a dynamic perspective and look at it from what they had done and what they had said and how they carried themselves, and then how we're supposed to kind of go by. So we'll start with ayah number 11, inshallah, with Surat AlHashr. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا يقولون لإخوانهم الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب لئن أخرجتم لنخرجن معكم ولا نطيع فيكم أحدا أبدا وإن قوتلتم لننصرنكم والله يشهد إنهم لكاذبون. لئن أخرجوا لا يخرجون معهم ولئن قوتلوا لا ينصرونهم ولئن نصروهم ليولن الأدبار. So it's لا يولن. So لا يولن. So there's two shaddas on the lam and then on the noon. The lam has a dhamma, so لا يولن الأدبار. ثم لا ينصرون. So he says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, did you not see, speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, alam tara, did you not see, ila alladhina nafaqu. So again, ila, whenever you add ila to alam tara, it's no longer that you saw with your eyes, it's more did you not know or have you not been told. Because when you, in the Arabic language, tara, which is to see, does not require a ila after it for it to work. You don't say ra'aytu ila shams, you say ra'aytu shams. You don't say I looked at, you don't add ila for it to make sense. If you add ila, then you're actually saying that the word tara is no longer the physical seeing with your eyes. It's more, did this information not come to your attention? Did you not know about this? And that's what he means. And he used the word tara because it has within it the figurative meaning of contemplation. Did you not think about this as well? So did this information not come to your attention, and did you not think about it? And that's why he uses tara, because it helps both meanings and it offers that comprehension. So alam tara ila alladhina nafaqu, to the people who chose to be hypocrite. Nafaqa is chose to be a hypocrite. Now, I don't want to go through the linguistic usage of it, because it can be a little bit confusing. But all you need to know is the word nifaq is hypocrisy, and nafaqa is someone who practices hypocrisy. What is hypocrisy really? I think that's more important than the linguistic root of the word in Arabic. Is when you decide that you don't really, so the full-blown hypocrisy is when someone's like, I'm going to say I'm Muslim and then work against it. Like actually try and tear it down from the inside, which is the worst type of hypocrisy, and that's obviously. And then there are other levels of hypocrisy where you're like, I don't want to come off as not Muslim, but also I'm not really interested in really committing to all of this. Like I don't want to be included in everything. I'm not really willing to give my wealth or my life or my dedication to this, and I don't want to be held to that. I just want the familial benefit. I want the cultural benefit. I want the identity. My family is Muslim, so I want to be known as Muslim, but I have no interest in practicing or following any of the rulings or laws. That's another aspect of nifaq. And nifaq is a spectrum, obviously, that starts with just losing some of the basic decency ethics, like saying the truth and coming through with your covenants and not mistreating people when you're upset with them, which is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. أربع من كن فيه كان منافقا خالصا ومن كانت فيه خصلة منهن كانت فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعها. Meaning there are four things. If you have them, then you are a full hypocrite, and if you only have one of them, then you have a piece of hypocrisy in you until you get rid of it. And then he gave examples. إذا حدث كذب وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا اؤتمن خان وإذا خاصم فجر. If someone when they speak, they're not truthful. When they are entrusted with something, they betray that trust. When they promise something, they don't come through with their covenants. And when they are upset and they are in a dispute with someone, they lose their ethics, meaning they mistreat them, they say what they shouldn't say. So the Prophet ﷺ gave us that there's a spectrum, even in his hadith. Like you can have a little bit of nifaq in you, or you can be a full-blown hypocrite. So hypocrisy is shades of gray. It's not something clear, and they exist within any ummah. They exist in any Muslim community. They're a part of community. They were a part of it during the Prophet ﷺ's time. They're still a part of it today. The difference being that the Prophet ﷺ's time, he knew exactly who they were, and he had names. In our time, we don't. We don't have names. And you can't make a list. As intriguing as that may sound to you, you're not allowed to make a list of hypocrites in a community. Sit down and say, you know what, here are the Muslims, and here's a list of all those who I think are hypocrites just based on, no, you're not allowed to do that. And that's actually a huge musibah. And to call someone a hypocrite, by the way, within a community is very dangerous. Like calling someone a hypocrite is probably is as bad as calling them a kafir. Like if someone says, La ilaha illallah, and you come to them and call them a disbeliever, then one of you is going to be a kafir from that moment moving forward. So either the other person, you're right, or it's you now because you called them Muslim kafir, now you've left the faith, so you have to go back into it again. And calling them a hypocrite is just as bad, especially in large Muslim communities, because you don't have, the criteria that the Prophet ﷺ is giving is a criteria for personal accountability, not for not for the accountability of others. Meaning, I'm not allowed to look at you and say, look, you're lying a lot and you're betraying your trust a lot, so you're 50% hypocrite right now. That's not okay. That's you should never even think that way. But what the ayah is saying is that there are people like that amongst you, and actually, to be more for this juz' to be more diligent on the matter, we're going to recite a surah soon, maybe a few, 2 or 3 surahs down the road, that's going to be called al-munafiqun, the hypocrites, and just talk about them, and just talk about the relationship that needs to exist there, and why, and the fear, and the stuff. But it's brought up here, to acknowledge that they are a part of society. Is it Isha time? Is that Isha time? Oh, what happened to the thing there? Someone should. It's okay. So they're pointed out here in this surah as acknowledging them as a part of society, meaning we're not allowed to actually go up to because you're not allowed to actually categorize them. You can't really strip them from citizenship. The Prophet ﷺ, if that was possible, he would have done that. He would have stripped them. He would have told them, you guys aren't actually Muslims. You're munafiqeen. I know who you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me, leave. Get out. You're not allowed to be here. Because I know you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me, so it's not that I'm assuming it. I actually have knowledge. He didn't. They stayed in Medina all his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, and after his death, alayhi salatu wasalam. Hudayfa had the names just as an insurance policy, that they wouldn't run for office, that they wouldn't try and take over things, because if they did, then Hudayfa would be like, what are you doing? I have the names, you're on the list. Stay quiet. Just stay quiet. You're not gonna be held accountable for anything, but just don't misbehave. Don't try and ruin what Islam is destined to be. So he was just a walking insurance policy, radiallahu anhu, to make sure that the munafiqeen couldn't actually cause any ruckus during the time after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. But they existed during his life. So the ayah is saying, did you not see, or you're not aware of how الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا, the people, يَقُولُونَ لِإِخْوَانِهِمْ, what they said to their brothers, and it uses that term, يَقُولُونَ لِإِخْوَانِهِمْ, to their brothers. And it's not the brotherhood is not brotherhood of race here, it's brotherhood of theology or ideology or belief system. Just like the Muslims are brothers not based on, you just said it, the ayah before, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا. So you're making dua for your brothers and sisters, not who are culturally related to you or racially, but theologically, they are a part of your deen. So the brotherhood is the brotherhood of Islam. So here the same applies. It's the brotherhood of disbelief, or the brotherhood of working against what Islam is. يَقُولُونَ لِإِخْوَانِهِمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. They're talking to the disbelievers from the people of the book. So it's pointing out two things, that they have their own faith and they're also disbelievers of Islam. So another group to be identified. So now we talked about treason, we talked about the relationship with the poor within the financial system, we talked about the different groups of Muslims, now we're talking about the hypocrites and the disbelievers, and that's everybody. That is the fabric of the Muslim country society. That's what it came, the Prophet ﷺ, that's who he was dealing with. We tend to believe it wasn't just one group, it was actually a lot of groups. They didn't all see eye to eye on almost anything, and they disagreed, and they were. So what is it that they did here? يقولون لإخوانهم الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب لئن أخرجتم لنخرجن معكم ولا نطيع فيكم أحدا أبدا وإن قتلتم لننصرنكم والله يشهد إنهم لكاذبون. They told the people of Bani Nadir. Remember the story at the beginning of the surah? When the story of treason was talked about, it was talked about in the context of what Banu Nadir did. Banu Nadir tried to kill him, alayhi salatu wasalam. They prepared an assassination plan. It didn't go through. It was caught, they refused to acknowledge it, and they stood by those who did it, and the Prophet ﷺ ended up setting a siege around their castles, and they ended up getting really scared, and then they left. During the siege, the munafiqeen inside, the hypocrites on the inside, would send messages to the leaders of Bani Nadir. And they would say, لَإِنْ أُخْرِجْتُمْ, if you are removed or expelled, لَنَخْرُجَنَّ مَعَكُمْ, we will leave with you. وَلَا نُطِيعُ فِيكُمْ أَحَدًا أَبَدًا, and we would never ever work against you. Meaning نُطِيع is to obey. فِيكُمْ, we wouldn't obey someone to do something about you. That's just one word, نُطِيعُ فِيكُمْ, is to say that I would never obey someone else regarding something that will affect you in a negative way. وَلَا نُطِيعُ فِيكُمْ أَحَدًا أَبَدًا, we would never obey. And they're obviously referring to the Prophet ﷺ. We wouldn't obey him regarding whatever he wanted us to do with you, or whatever he's trying to do. وَإِن قُوتِلْتُمْ, and if a war is to the outbreak of a war, meaning if there's a battle, if you guys came out down, you opened the castle doors and fought the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims, لَنَنْصُرَنَّكُمْ, we will stand by you or we will help you. وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّهُمْ لَكَاذِبُونَ, and Allah is witness that they are lying. And Allah is witness that everything that they're saying to them is a lie, because they don't have the ability to commit to anything. The problem with hypocrisy is the fact that the person is not willing to commit to anything, that they don't really believe in anything, and they're not really willing to live or die for anything. They may not like what you're doing, so they won't do it with you, but they're not really also willing to stand on the other side and fight you for it. They just want to. That's a problem with it. Really today, that's the problem. You can't live life where you have a foot here and a foot there. It just doesn't work. You can try. Be my guest. Go ahead, give it a shot. It's not going to work for you. At some point you're going to be forced to make a choice of where you belong and what you're about and what you're going to do with your life. You can't say, well, you know what? If there's akhirah, I am praying, and if there's dunya, I take long vacation in the Bahamas every year a couple of times. I'm taking. If there's no akhirah, I'm having a good time, and if there's akhirah, I pray and I take care of it. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. You think it won't. You will be forced into a position where you have to make a choice of who you are and what you're about, and that may happen early in life, and that may happen in midlife or later in life, but it for sure will. The munafiq is just someone who doesn't want to commit to anything. Why? Because it's a lot of trouble to commit to something. It really is. It's much easier not to. Like, it's way less effort and energy. Do I have to? Like, can I just? Who's winning? Who? Okay, it's just easier. Just clap for the team that's winning, because that way there's less likelihood that you have to actually do anything or be a part of anything. So for them, the munafiqeen, their issue is that they saw the Prophet ﷺ to be weak, and that this country that he's building is not going to work, and it's impossible it's going to work. And look at this, what mess is this? He has people from all over the place. So it's not going to work. So can we just, who's stronger? Can we just stand by the stronger group and support them, and hopefully, but they're not really willing to support. Wallahu yashhad, Allah is witness that they are lying. When they're saying, oh, if you are removed, we'll leave with you. We will never do anything against you. If they fight you, we will fight with you. You're lying. You don't believe in anything that much. You don't act. لَإِنْ أُخْرِجُوا لَا يَخْرُجُونَ مَعَهُمْ. If they are expelled, they won't leave with them, which is exactly what happened. When they were expelled, the munafiqeen stayed right where they were in Medina, didn't move. وَلَإِنْ قُوتِلُوا, and if they were to be fought, لَا يَنْصُرُونَهُم, they won't stand by them. وَلَإِنْ نَصَرُوهُم, and if they did try to stand by them and support them, لَيُوَلُّنَّ الْأَدْبَارَ, they'll run away at the end. Like right before things get really, really heated, they'll لَيُوَلُّنَّ الْأَدْبَارَ. Al-adbar is your back. يُوَلِّ الدُّبُرْ is a phrase in Arabic, means that you turn your back and you run in the opposite direction, which is a figure of speech to point out basically cowardly behavior during a battle. لَيُوَلُّنَّ الْأَدْبَارَ, and they won't stand. ثُمَّ لَا يُنصَرُونَ, and they will not be supported. Meaning they won't be supported by anybody. They won't find any support at all. So the ayah is actually pointing out the problem with hypocrisy, which is the fact that it's just when you read these verses, what you end up finding out is that the Quran prefers a disbeliever over a munafiq, for sure. And if that's not clear through these verses, in Surat Al-Munafiqeen it will be. A kafir is preferred. Why? Because at least that person is honest. At least they're honest about it. They come out and they say what they believe. The munafiq is neither here nor there. And they continue, and they're a part of your group. And they're a weight that you have to carry. They're a burden upon your ummah that you have to carry, you have to deal with. They're a citizen. Look, the ayat, they're not removed. The ayat didn't talk about them being removed at all. And the ayat are going to go in more detail. They're not going to be removed, they're not going to be expelled, they're going to lose their rights. No, they continue to exist, no problem. But they're a burden because they don't stand by you. And when they can, they kind of stand against you, but not enough to actually make a difference. So there's somewhere in the middle, and that's a problem. What I try to tell people is, especially younger people, you have to figure out what you want to do in your life. What do you stand for? What are your core values and principles? What are your core ethics? And who are you? And that's really an important question for you to answer in your life. And it makes life much easier for you to live. If you say, I am a Muslim, and I believe with all my soul that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught and what the Prophet ﷺ has brought is the truth, and then if you say that to yourself, then you can live that way. But if you don't really fully believe that, then you'll follow aspects of Islam, and other aspects you'll fail, you won't be able to, and you'll just keep on. It's like a pinball. You're just kind of pinballing back and forth for a long time. I just feel bad for the people who do that. Like, well, I feel bad for you. What type of life is this? Choose something, Ammi. Just choose a side, just for your own sake, for your own mental well-being. It's easier if you just choose something, because when you're on the other, because it's hard to live that way. It's hard actually to have a conversation with someone that's like, I always talking to younger people. If they have no conviction at all, it's impossible for me to have a conversation. Like if they don't believe something, I can't. If they don't care, like they don't care. None of this matters. Like faith in general doesn't matter. There's no basis for me to have a conversation. Like the parents bring them in and talk. What is there for me to talk about? If this issue is not of any importance to the person, there's nothing to talk about. I need someone with a conviction, like a belief. I need someone who has believed something. So I can say, okay, let's believe, and let's start there. Here's the common ground. Here's what we have in common in terms of our beliefs. Let's build on that and move in a direction where we can figure out why you think what you think, and maybe what I can offer you in terms of a different perspective. But when they don't think about this at all, it doesn't matter to them, then there's nothing to do. There's nothing you can do. Maybe there is, and I have failed, but it's been 25 years, and I still have not figured out even remotely anything that can be offered, aside from maybe challenging the fact that they don't think about anything. And saying that isn't healthy. You should definitely take this seriously. It'll affect who you are. Not just about akhirah. It's important to figure out what you're going to stand. Like the big questions of life, the existential questions that you have to have answers for them. You have to know what you believe. What exactly are you going to commit yourself to? That's a big deal. You can't ignore these questions forever. You can ignore them for a while, for sure, especially young and you're healthy, and yeah, you can ignore them for a couple of years. That's fine. But at some point, you have to have something. You have to have something. And I argue that as Muslims, sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes I feel we don't do that very well. We don't really contemplate and come up with that, where I belong, and what group I'm going to stand by, what I stand for. And I find that people without faith do it earlier. They don't have a faith, so they feel lost, so they have to figure out something. So they come up with a thought process. It's not necessarily right, but it's there. It's there. It's something. They build on something. But then Muslims, because Islam is there, so Islam is supposed to be the answer to all this. But you didn't really contemplate Islam or practice it or embrace it or incorporate it into yourself. So it's not really. It's just a thought. It's like theoretically this is what it is, but not practically. And I see that a lot because in my line of work, people are stuck with really difficult moments where they're being told, life is limited, like you don't have a lot of time. And I see like a lot of Muslims, they don't deal with it in a healthy way. It's not dealt with in a healthy way. So it's as if they were Muslim for a long time, but never ever talked about death once. Right? They're Muslim, but never ever contemplated the fact that at some point this will end, or thought about the fact that it's very weird, because if you're a Muslim, that's really honestly the only thing that you're doing. You're always thinking about accountability on the Day of Judgment, that I'm going to one day move on and be held by Allah. So you're always thinking about this, all you're really thinking about. But because sometimes we don't really contemplate these things, we know they're there. The Sheikh told us that. The teacher at school told us that. We heard it, but we didn't contemplate it. So when it becomes real, we're taken back because we didn't really think about this appropriately. But people without faith, because they don't have anything, they have to contemplate, figure out something. They figure out something wrong, but at least they're at peace with it. And when they're told it's going to end, they're like, all right, I knew this was going to happen at some point. This is what I'm going to do about it. And they have a plan. But then a lot of us don't, because we haven't accepted the fact that I remember this. Wallahi, it was one of the weirdest encounters I've ever had. He came in. He came into the clinic room in a wheelchair, on like 3 or 4 liters of oxygen, You could hear him breathing from outside the room. Extremely overweight, legs, wallahi, like polar bears, like just filled with fluid, like 78 years old. This is the third cancer that he's been diagnosed with. I remember when I talked to this guy, he said, "You need to fix this because I haven't lived yet." It's literally what he told me. And I looked at it and I said, "Sorry, excuse me." Like I thought I misheard. Like I haven't really lived yet. I haven't lived yet. And then I thought to myself, yeah, that's true. I don't think there's any point in life where you feel, yeah, I've had enough. Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma said, يعني, وَمَنْ يَعِشْ ثَمَانِينَ حَوْلًا لَا أَبَا لَكَ يَسْأَمِي. Like he in his poetry says, yeah, if you live 80 years, you get tired of it. I think he was lying. I think he was probably lying about it. Like I don't think at any point you're like, I'm good, I've had enough. Please, where's the exit? Is there a way out? Unless you are, people have severe mental illnesses where they are struggling with reasons to live. That's fine, and that's understandable. I understand that. So, but if that's not the case, the instinct of every living thing is to live more. And the human being, there's always something. So the concept, I don't think at any point you're like, I'm good. I've been here long enough. I'm good to go. Unless you take time to wrap your head around the fact that, around your mortality, that you're okay with that. And wrapping your head around your mortality means that at some point you have to commit to some theory. I'm saying theory, but that's not really what it is, right? It's more than that. But you have to commit yourself to something. What is your explanation? How do you understand the world that you live in? What is it? If it's Islam, ahlan wa sahlan, then here's what Islam is about. Here's how you can practice it, and here's how you can live a life that has meaning to it, and you'll be okay with what's to come. And if not, then wallahi, you'll just continue to be pinballed all your life between one thing and the other. You'll struggle up and down, and you'll be very unhappy. I'm not saying that being a kafir will make you happy. That's not what I'm saying. I hope this is not what this is coming off as. Because that's not what I'm trying. I imagine the shaykh is telling people, please leave. No, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I'm saying that it's important that you take time because the nifaq is a problem. It'll put you in a position where you don't really believe in anything. You're not really committed to anything. What time is Isha? Because that thing is not... huh? Is it 8:15? 15? Okay. All right. Then, okay, less than that. It's only... Oh, you have 3 minutes. All right. So we'll stop there. Honestly, I was hoping to get to the end of the page here because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to talk about the problem of the disbelievers of Ahl Kitab and the problem of the munafiqeen. And he'll point out some major issues in their value system of why it is that they are the way they are. They continue to be citizens of this country. Like they were not removed. They were not. Those who betrayed were expelled. Everyone else continued to stay. All the other tribes of Ahl Kitab stayed in Medina. The munafiqeen who made this, who actually communicated that with the Ahl Kitab, they continued to stay in Medina. They were not expelled out of Medina. The ayah is saying that, yeah, these are people amongst you. You have to continue to work with them. They're not. But I'm trying to explain where the problem comes. Because we have to choose within the Surat AlHashr model of what citizenship actually looks like. We have to choose which group we're a part of, where we belong, and what do we actually believe in, and how we're going to carry ourselves in that framework. And this is really what the surah is trying to educate us on. Are we one of those early group Muslims? Are we the people who were there before, who came after? Are the people who came late? Are we living a life of hypocrisy? Are we actually amongst those of kafaru min ahl kitab? Are we that far? Are we people who betrayed already, who committed these? You have to figure out where you lie in this group and what exactly you want to be. Because it's a diverse community. The Muslim society, Muslim country is diverse. And you can live and you'll be fine, but you have to figure out who you are. Because Yawm al-Qiyamah, that's why that surah ends so powerfully. Surat al-Hashr is one of those surahs where it's always a little bit, so it's kind of, if you don't understand what it's talking about, it almost strikes you as a little bit, what's going on here? You have verses that are extremely sentimental in the middle when it talks about the Muslims. And then the rest of it is very pragmatic. It talks about logistics. It talks about the legal aspect and rules and punishments and what needs to happen. And then the end of it is just heart-wrenching. The end of Surat Al-Hashr is probably one of the most beautiful verses in the entirety of the Quran. Like if you're ever in a position where you have to recite something, you want to make it beautiful, you'll never go wrong by starting يعني يا الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس. You'll never go like it's always a good. Just run to that. It's your backup that you can always use because it's just beautiful. Just very, very beautiful. And that's how it ends because, and I'll explain that in more detail next week of why that's the case. When you read all this, it's almost unclear why it's like that. It's because there are issues within the Muslim community that are going to be governed by law. And then there's going to be stuff that are going to be governed by the ethics, by the values of what it means to be Muslim, by the akhlaq of our faith and the closeness and the brotherhood that we carry. And that would be really nice if we were able to go back to that and take a step out and just appreciate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and really appreciate the fact that we're part of an ummah, part of a community, and belong to them and feel towards them the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to feel towards them. And that's kind of what this surah, to a certain degree, is trying to explain to us. I'll end with that, inshallah. We'll continue the tafsir next week. Subhanallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khairan. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.